Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about how you can teach your ships to dodge projectiles or bullets or objects that come at them. So let me look at my Gatling ship because right now it's my best dodger. Object Gatling. So basically when a bullet comes at it, or a fireball, whatever comes at it, it needs to move to one side or the other to dodge the attack. So the first thing I did is I made a parent object enemy fire. So there's many different kinds of bullets that could come at you or projectiles that could come at you, and they're all children of enemy fire. Chase M2, I probably shouldn't have named it that, but it doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Chase M2 is the nearest projectile, the nearest enemy fire. So this is what you're trying to dodge, is the nearest enemy fighter, which is Chase M2. The difference in x between the projectile you're dodging and your ship is Chase M2.x minus object Gatling.x. The difference in y position would be Chase M2.y minus object Gatling.y. Pretty simple. Then I want to account for velocity. So I don't just want to say, oh, if this is to the left of me, move right. If this is the right of me, move left. Because what if my ship's moving left very fast, and maybe the projectile is a bit to the left of me, but I'm moving left so fast, the best way to dodge it is just move left faster. I want to account for the velocity of my ship to decide which way I should move to dodge. So difference in velocity, x, chase nem2 dot phi speed x minus object Gatling dot phi speed x. Difference velocity y, chase nem2 dot phi speed y minus object Gatling phi speed y. And then I'm just going to do a calculation over here, which is basically designed to figure out, do I move left or do I move right to dodge the attack? Do I move up or do I move down to dodge the attack? And I'm going to dodge the attack down here. Basically, I'm going to apply the y velocity of the projectile as a force in the x direction and the x velocity of the projectile as a force in the y direction. And the reason for that is I don't just want to move directly away from the projectile. I want to move to the side of the projectile. So if the projectile is coming at me in the x direction, I don't just want to move negative in the x direction. I want to move in the y direction to move to the side and have it pass me by. So I apply the x velocity of the projectile as a force in the y direction to dodge. I apply the y velocity of the projectile as a force in the x direction to dodge. That part's simple enough, but the hard part is to know, do I move up or down to dodge? Do I move left or right? And that's what this calculation is all about. If difference in y over difference in x is greater than difference velocity y over difference velocity x, n equals 1, therefore I would have an upward, well, I should have, this is positive, which affects which way the velocity goes. And for this one here, if difference x over difference y is greater than difference velocity x over difference velocity y, then n2 is positive, otherwise it's negative. And so this will determine to move left, right, up, or down. So I want to go more into how this works. So let me move over here. Okay, so imagine my spaceship's here, imagine projectiles up here, imagine its difference x is 2, difference y is negative 2. And you might say, well, how's it negative 2? It's, difference y should be the y position of this object minus the y position of this object. So this has a 0 position. Shouldn't 2 minus 0 be 2? Well, 2 minus 0 is 2, but actually when you're up here, you're negative 2. And that is because when you're programming in GameMaker Studio, upwards is negative. So if this is 0, that's negative 2. So the position here, if that's 0, 0, That is, x is 2, y is negative 2, because up is negative. And so that can make things kind of confusing sometimes, but since up is negative, the difference in x is 2 in this case, the difference in y is negative 2. And now I'd also like to point out that the difference, let's just say that this is at rest, and so I'm moving this way, so the difference in velocity, let's say, is negative 1, because this velocity is negative 1, that velocity is 0, so difference in velocity is negative 1 in the x direction, but difference velocity in the y direction, the velocity is downward. Down is positive in the y direction when you're programming in GameMaker. So the difference in velocity is positive 1. Okay, so if all speeds stay the same, projectile would hit the spaceship up here because it's, 2 higher, 2 over. So if it moves the same x speed as the same y speed, this angle is going to hit. But here's an example. Let's say that the difference in x is 2, but the difference in y is only 1. Or the difference in x would be negative 2, difference y is only 1. However, the velocity we'll say is the same. Velocity would be positive 1, negative 1. So, velocity would be negative 1 in the x direction, positive 1 in the y direction. So if you have the same velocity vector here, right, same angle velocity vector, but the position is now over here where the x difference is 2. Oh, shoot. Yeah, so x difference is 2, and y difference is negative 1. I think I said that wrong, I'm sorry. So as you go this way, you're not going to hit the object. You are going to land on the right side of the object. So basically when the y is the same, when the y position is the same as the object, the x position will be to the right. When the x position is the same as the object, the y position will be below. So it's going to pass by to the right of the object, and it's going to pass by below the object. Therefore, to move to dodge, you want to move this way, right? If I start, let's say I applied the force in the opposite direction, I could actually move into the object and make myself crash into it. So I don't want to move down this way, I want to move up this way to dodge. And that's what this calculation is all about. If difference y over difference x is greater than difference velocity y, difference velocity x, this equation is what lets it know, does it move this way or does it move that way? Okay, so let's go more into this situation. Difference x, 2, because x position is 2. At 0, 2 minus 0 is 2. Difference y, negative 1, because this way is negative, so that's negative 1 y position. All right, so difference y over difference x, that's negative 1/2, because negative 1 over 2 is negative 1/2. Difference velocity x. The velocity x is negative 1. Velocity y is 1. Difference velocity y is 1. So difference velocity y over difference velocity x is negative 1. Therefore, dy over dx is 1/2, whereas dvy over dvx is negative 1. So negative 1/2 is greater than negative 1. Therefore, n is positive. N is positive. And dx over dy is negative 2, right? Dx is 2 over negative 1 is negative 2. But dvx over dvy is still negative 1. Okay, so still negative 1. So negative 2 is this. Negative 2 is less than negative 1, right? So because -2, this is less than that, and 2 is -1. All right, so you apply a y velocity in the x direction times n2. Look at my code again. You apply a y velocity in the x direction times n2. Now, y velocity is positive. N2 is negative. Positive times negative equals negative, so you apply a negative force in the x direction. So that means you apply a force that way. So you see this has a that way force. So now you apply an x velocity in the y direction. Apply an x velocity in the y direction times 1, because n is 1. Let's go back here. You apply an x velocity in the y direction times n. N is 1. X velocity is negative, right? Because the velocity is this direction, that's negative. Negative times 1 is negative. -1 force means you go left. So you are applying a negative y force, which is up, because up is negative, and you're applying a negative x force, which is left. And that's exactly the way you want to move to dodge the object. So this will figure out which way to move to dodge the object, and this doesn't just work when the spaceship's at rest. Even if the spaceship is moving, it'll still make this calculation based off the difference in speed between the spaceship and the projectile. So even if the spaceship's moving really fast, it can still figure out which direction to move to dodge. So this actually works. And so I thought this was pretty cool. It's really easy to get mixed up which direction to go, and upwards being negative makes it more confusing. So it's really easy to mix this up, but the code's not really all that complicated. So let's kind of go over this basic code again. Parent object enemy fire, nearest enemy fighter, chase in M2, nearest enemy fire. So just calculate the difference in x, difference in y from the nearest enemy fire. Difference velocity x, difference velocity y from the nearest enemy fire. Use that in this calculation to figure out, do I want to move left or right, up or down? Then I apply the force. And I have some stuff I didn't really use here. I tried a few different ways to get this to work. I was pretty new at programming, and I don't think I'd do anything with this at all. But here I'll just point out, if the distance from the enemy fire is less than 1300, apply this. And then here, the other thing it does is it has distance and previous distance. So the way it calculates distance, square root of the square of difference in x, the square of difference in y. This is basic geometry to calculate distance. Distance, previous distance. If distance is less than previous distance, then the object's moving closer to me. So let's say there's a projectile, it's close to me, but it's aimed away from me. Well, then distance will not be less than previous distance, right? Distance will be more than previous distance if it's moving away from me. So first it checks, is it close enough to me? Then it checks, is it moving towards me? If it's close enough to me and it's moving towards me, then it will apply a force to move away from me. And left or right, up or down depends on this calculation here so that it can effectively dodge. So this I think is pretty useful. I found that because it only dodges the nearest projectile that's moving towards you, it's not, because it only dodges the nearest projectile, it's not like it dodges perfectly if you have lots of projectiles coming at the ship. It won't perfectly dodge all of them. These ships are far from invincible, but I have found that a ship that has this dodge ability does a whole lot better than a ship without it. And this can help make your allies or enemies a lot more formidable. So I hope you found this helpful. I want to say thank you for watching.